Good vibrations.
Well, you've heard today's guest on the series before. He's been on talking about his book series of classic albums and the artists that created them. It's Farmer Charlie down in Mexico. Welcome back, brother.
Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure and an honor to always be back with you, Mark. I literally mean that. You are one of our absolute best friends and favorites, and thank you very much.
Well, you're always too kind. We're talking about some different stuff today. We're leaving the music stuff aside, and it's fitting that we're doing this just prior to the festival that we refer to these days as Christmas in most parts of the world, because it has relevance to this time of the year, but this subject also goes a whole lot further. And one thing I've noticed is that often on the TV, particularly in the UK, I'm sure you don't notice because you don't have a TV, good on you, but there was this movie that came out in the 50s called The Greatest Story Ever Told, and it starred Max von Sydow. It had Charlton Heston in it, and it was ostensibly the story of Jesus of Nazareth told from the perspective of the New Testament, you know. So they wheel out this film every year along with The Great Escape and The Sound of Music, and they call it The Greatest Story Ever Told. But I think what we're going to talk about today might be the real contender for the greatest story ever told. And in the same way that natural or spiritual law isn't taught in schools, it probably speaks volumes that this process that we're going to discuss today isn't taught in schools either, or colleges or universities. So after that kind of intro, we'd probably better get into it and let listeners know what we're talking about. So where would you like to start with all this, man?
Well, that's a great introduction, and what you're saying is exactly true. They do every year just roll out the favorites, and what you're seeing is this conspiracy, of course, everything is, of organized society. And that's the first thing for everyone to realize, that there are no independents out there within organized society. It's just a team. And really, what we've been discovering and what this is all about is that it's team upside down. So what exists is the truth. And if something isn't the truth, it's the opposite of the truth. You can call it whatever you want. A lie would be a deception, or a lie would be probably good terms for it. But the fact of the matter is, all that truly exists is the truth. And that's creation. And everything that you just talked about is creation. Everything that society, organized society, team organized society talks about is the opposite of creation. Of course, as you know, it all goes back, they try to tell us, to the Big Bang. And this is what you see. So Hollywood, same as religion. Television, same as Hollywood and religion. NASA, they're on the same team. Your TV news, when you turn it on, even if it's a local affiliation in London somewhere or some other part of the UK, it's team deception. And it's all organized because, of course, as you well know, there is no real currency. Everything has been hijacked. And so we just have paper money. It's just monopoly money. It's just zeros and ones on a computer. There's only about 6 or 7% that's in circulation now. So they print very little of it. The rest is in computers. And so they buy people off, and it is a massive organization. And what they do is they churn out lies. And what I'll just quickly say, because this might help guide both of us through the talk today. When you look at the symbol for what people call the Illuminati, it's the Freemason logo, because the Illuminati, and they're not the illuminated ones at all, we'll get into that today as well, but they hijacked Freemasonry. And the reason they did is because Freemasonry is civilian military, right? So the good soldier never looks behind. The good Freemason never looks behind. It's just up that ladder. Let me get up that ladder as fast as I can. And that's what they do. And they tell no secrets, and they repeat no information. It's a secret club, and that's what they need. So when you look at the modern symbol of the so-called Illuminati, and it's the modern image of Freemasonry, you'll see it's the compass and the square. They're pointing in at one another, and they are creating a womb. If you look at it closely, it is. It's a female womb. And inside of the female womb, growing, being birthed in the center of it is G. And G stands for God, but it's not our God. It's their God. And the reality, what we're going to get into today, Mark, and this is fascinating. I wouldn't want to be alive at any other part in human history. This is it. This is it right now. Because we do have a real war, a real battle going on. And believe me, they're dead serious about this, and they're winning. And what the war is turning our entire reality, which is truth, into a goddamn gigantic lie where everything is a lie. And so their G, the Freemason G, is their God. And their God is the opposite of ours, which is lies and deception. And that's the team. And everyone is part of the team. So when you talk about Charlton Heston and the Hollywood movies that come out, they're on the exact same team as NASA. Team NASA, Team Hollywood, Team TV, Team News, Team Politicians, Team Pope. Religion, organized religion, is a complete hoax and sham. And all they do and have done is lie to you. And I'll just say this and I'll let you jump back in. Here's the biggest conundrum about the reality that we live in terms of religion. Virtually 99.9% of all humanity either hate the Bible for what they think it stands for, or they don't know the first thing about the Bible, and those are Christians, because they don't read the literal words. They call themselves literalist Christians, but they don't actually read the literal words of God and of the Christus, of Jesus Christ. And God and Jesus are saying this throughout the Bible. You don't listen to us. You are not listening to us. You need to take this word that we are saying and follow the word that we are saying, and do not enter into the temple out there. You must enter into the temple in here. You must go within. The kingdom of God lies within. It is all within. And throughout the Bible, everything throughout the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, all of these allegorical tales are all talking about the same essential allegory, the ascended man going within. And Christians are told not to meditate, not to follow the third eye, the pineal, not to go within. And so here's our supposition for today, and that is virtually all Christians are doing the exact opposite of what God and Jesus have said and are saying to them in the Bible itself. And that's staggering.
Well, that's a way to get a show started.
Wow.
So what we're going to be talking about is a process. You hinted at it there, an internal process. I refer to it myself as an internal alchemical process. It just helps me stay on track and, comprehend what it is. And it's your contention that this process is encoded throughout the Bible in its parables and allegories, and that when the Bible is viewed from this perspective, it gives us empowering and liberating truth. It's just that the vast majority of Christians reading it are taking the stories literally and missing the fact that everything is cloaked in allegory, and what it's all encoding is what I refer to as this internal alchemical process, right? So I've heard you do a really great job of breaking down this process on one of your shows. And I remember Santos Bonacci talking about this years ago. I think it was on a Red Ice radio show. And it blew my mind back then. I didn't fully comprehend it. And then when I came across your recent shows, I remembered what I'd heard from Santos. And it really chimed with me because you did a great job of making it so relevant. So do you want to walk us through what we're talking about here?
Sure, I will. First off, you're absolutely right to call it an alchemical process. Alchemy is science, and it's the science of the mind within. And that's what you have in the third ventricle. And this is where the laboratory, the whole concept of the laboratory comes from. It's in Solomon's temple. And Solomon's temple is the third ventricle of your brain. That's where the Ark of the Covenant is, Noah's Ark, They're one and the same. And again, like I said to you, it's not just theoretical, it's literal. Inside your skull is the Ark of the Covenant. And you've got the greater wings, the lesser wings, and they are holding the magic and the essence of who we are, which is the third ventricle of the brain. So in between the lesser wings of the arc that's literally above the bridge of our nose, right where our two eyes are, and then just above in the center where the pineal gland would be inside, it's actually the thalamus, and then on one side it's the pineal and the other is the pituitary. Joseph and Mary, male and female, everything is polarity. Our entire reality is a polarity. That's how the gift of free will works against everything being a polarity. And this is the laboratory, and that's alchemical science. And this is the laboratory of our brain between the pituitary and the pineal gland. This is where all the magic occurs, and virtually no one knows about. It's not talked about, and yet it is in every single ancient text. It dominates. And when I say it's in essentially every page, and it is every page of the Bible, it's in every page of the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedas or the Upanishads or the Buddhist texts.
So in the Bible, it's in both the Old and New Testaments, right?
Absolutely. And again, it's all encoding sacred geometry and what God gave us. So, again, when you have someone walking around the walls, David walking around the walls of Jericho, and he goes around 7 times, and then after the 7th time, the walls come down. I mean, this didn't happen, but it's the number 7. It is the number 7 and what the number 7 means, which is so very, very important to understand 1 through 12 and what each of these numbers mean. And this is alchemy. So just going back to what you said, you've got it exactly right. It's alchemical science. It's in the brain. And the Bible is not a history book. And the Bible isn't a collection of sort of whimsical, fanciful tales about whales and arcs either. The Bible is the most staggering book of science and mathematics that you could ever possibly imagine. And in the Bible, the understanding of where everything is and the actual science related to us in the Bible and qubits is incredible. It's unbelievable. And then what you begin to see is that through ancient versions of society, like ancient Egypt, that they were so in tune to these teachings coming to us from the Essenes, the Gnostic Christians, and some of it eventually made its way into the Bible, that they were so in tune to this information that they magically put all of this information and they encoded it into their creations, like the pyramids. So the pyramids are the most stunning creations. One, because we still don't know how they were managed to build something so precise and exact. And you need to understand that every single aspect about the pyramid, the Great Pyramids, inside and out, are so carefully designed. And yet these stones, these natural stones, are so massive. And yet it's right down to the precise centimeter and the exact angles to be able to achieve what they were attempting to resonate. And it's alchemical science too, Mark, just like you said. And so to tie this in for the listener, for example, and this may be the first time you've ever heard this, but what the pyramids are deprivation chambers. And when you go inside the Great Pyramid, and really all the pyramids that I've studied and been in various parts like Mexico and Guatemala, they all are basically the same. They're replicating the Ark of the Covenant within our brain and what it holds, the third ventricle of the brain. And so you have the central chamber inside the Great Pyramid, which represents the thalamus. And the thalamus is the exact center of our brain. and it is a deprivation chamber. That's what it is, and that's what it's called even in the medical text. They don't really tell you much about it or what it does, but they do call it an actual chamber. So the thalamus is the exact deepest, darkest, silent part of the human brain, and it's a chamber. And on either side is the king's chamber and the queen's chamber. The king's chamber is the pineal gland. The queen's chamber is the pituitary gland. And if you take a cross-section of the human brain and you put it inside a representation, an exact representation of the Great Pyramid, and then you just enlarge proportionately the cross-section of the human brain, this is stunning, Mark. The location of the center chamber in the Great Pyramid and the king's chamber and the queen's chamber match up perfectly to the thalamus, the pineal gland, and the pituitary gland. This is where the ascended leaders within the community, or anyone who wanted to ascend, went to meditate. It is absolute deprivation. It is to silence the chaos of our left brain and our dominance of our emotions over our 5 fused senses, right? We have 5 vertebrae in the sacrum that are fused together. Those 5 fused vertebrae in our sacrum are the representation of our 5 physical senses. And where is the sacrum in this sacred process? And this is what the Bible talks about. The Bible, as I was saying earlier, is this stunning book of mathematics and science. And it is human physiology. That's what the Bible is. It is a series of allegorical tales that take you from the sacrum to the crown of your skull. And it is just stunningly accurate as it goes through all of this.
Sure. Talk us through the process of the Chrism Oil then, if you could break it down step by step.
Okay, perfect. So we just discussed the Bible goes from the sacrum to the crown of the skull. This is the Chrism Oil. Now, the Chrism Oil is not some theory like gravity or the Big Bang or anything else that organized society tries to tell us is the truth. The Chrism Oil is real. It is a sacred oil that is naturally released in human bodies from about the age of 12 onwards. And it occurs within the human body 12 times a year. And it happens, and I can provide for you, so you can provide for your listeners a link to various sites that will show them and allow them to very easily calculate. My days in December are, and Colleen, we have the same 2 days. I'm July 17, Colleen's July 18. So it's when the full moon enters into our sun sign, and we're both Cancers. So our days are coming up very soon here in December, and then we will be fasting, we will be predominantly meditating, and we'll be going in to allow this miraculous process of the Chrism Oil to complete its journey from on high, down to on low, and then back on high and ascend us again. So this occurs. This is scientific fact. This is real. The Chrism Oil is real, and it is measured, and you can measure it, and it is released within us 12 times a year. So Mark said that this is the greatest story never told, and it ties into the month of December and Christmas. How do these all tie in together? Because the Chrism Oil comes to us from a place at the back, near the top, not at the top, but it is at the very back of our skull, in the center, right in between the horizontal divide between the left ventricle or the left portion of our brain, the left cerebrum and the right. And at the back, there is an actual opening. And in this opening, there is right at the top of it a seat, and it's called the mercy seat. And this is where God comes to visit us on high within the human body. And there literally is a little indentation that looks like a seat where the colostrum is. And once a month, when the full moon enters into your sun sign, the colostrum releases the most precious of gifts, the gift of all gifts, and it sends it down an opening. And this opening is shaped just like a chimney. And this chimney runs from the back of the skull, the colostrum, and it goes straight into the third ventricle of the brain, this very, very center part that science acknowledges but doesn't like to talk about. And it's just staggering, because the opening for the Chrism oil to get into the third ventricle is called foramen. The foramen, there's an actual opening there. Foramen. And on one side of the foramen, there is an olive. On the other side of the foramen, there is a pyramid. And I'm not making this up. I am absolutely not making this up. If you go into any Gray's Anatomy or any of the medical encyclopedias, and you go through these various terms, the foramen is in there, colostrum is in there, and you will see that on one side of the foramen, this opening where the chrism oil goes, there is an olive, and on the other side, there is the pyramid. And these are, of course, allegories within the brain. So God has so encoded everything through the concept of an allegory that it's on the Holy Land, on earth, it's in the sky, it's all written in the stars, it's in our bodies, and it's in all of these ancient texts. So the olive being a representation of the manna from heaven, and the pyramid, which is the symbol of meditation, of going within. And of course, the oil literally does go within to this deepest, darkest chamber at the very center of our brain. That's the thalamus. Once in the thalamus, the chrism oil is immediately split, one half going to the pituitary gland, the other going to the pineal. Now, why does it do this? Because that's our reality. This is who we are. We are these soulful creations experiencing life in a physical body. So we are not bodies that have a soul. We are souls that just happen to have bodies. And we're here, and we're having this physical experience. To be able to have this experience, God loves us so much that he gifted us free will. Well, how do you make free will make us completely free? This is the only freedom that exists, folks. This is no exaggeration. Your laws, they're not laws. They're privileges that you have when they feel like it's fine for you to have them. As soon as they don't want us to have these privileges, take them away. The only freedom that exists is God's gift of free will. So why does the chrism oil get split? Why is everything a polarity? Why Joseph and Mary, male and female, on and off, electrical, magnetic, up and down, male and female? Everything is a polarity because it means that there's an infinite choice of possibilities between one or the other, light and darkness, and happy or sad. And so our free will means that we are able to choose anywhere we want to be on any of these lines of happy and sad and on and off and up and down and male and female, or any of these things. We get to choose in any single moment where we want to be. And it's impossible to replicate because there's no virtual end between light and darkness or any of these things. This is the brilliance of God's creation. The polarity and our free will means that we are truly free to be whomever we want to be in any moment. And therefore, life is nothing more than a choice in the moment, because we have infinite possibilities and we have this infinite gift to choose whatever we want. So the chrism oil gets split. The portion that goes to the pituitary gland becomes a milky substance. It is magnetically charged, therefore it is negatively charged. And it is called Mary, the mother of creation. And the other half of the fluid goes to the pineal gland. And this is a honey-like substance. It is a preserved substance. So the milk Just like dairy, milk is a creation of our physical realm, and it spoils within days. And this is why this process, you have to be very pure or virtuous during these 3 days of the chrism oil within our bodies. It's because of the mother's milk, Mary's milk, and it easily spoils. The pineal fluid is a preserved golden honey. And this is the representation of the masculine and the male. And it is electrical, not magnetic. And it is therefore positive, not negative. And it is called Joseph. Joseph and Mary, the mother and father of Jesus Christ. Chrism oil, chrism, meaning the Christos. Christos, meaning the anointed one or anointed oil. Jesus Christ is not some dude wearing some Crocs wandering around the Holy Land 2,000 years ago with a Puerto Rican name and selling weed to finance his various other operations. Jesus Christ never existed. No one in the Bible existed. All of these names and all of these events are merely allegories of the human body, human physiology, and in particular the human brain. Jesus Christ is an anointed oil that is gifted to us from on high, from the colostrum, down into the third ventricle of our brain 12 times a year. And this is staggering stuff. So who's gifting us the chrism oil from the colostrum? This is why the ancients, the Essenes, called the colostrum the Santos colostrum. And this is where it all, not Santos Bonacci, but the Santos colostrum. And this is where it all got reduced down from, because Santos is saintly or saint. It is the sacred colostrum. And Santos colostrum is Santa Claus. And this is our tradition of modern Christmas. Wow. And virtually no one understands that at all. So why does Santa Claus give us a gift that comes down a chimney on December 25th? Because in the northern sky, on December 21st, the cosmos, the night sky, the constellations in the night sky appear to stop. And they do perceptually for 3 days. And December 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, there is no movement. And of course, we can see it. It's right above us, our home here in Mexico right now. They're coming into perfect alignment, not quite yet, but they're almost there. And on December 22nd, 23rd, 24th, they are in absolute perfect alignment. And what am I talking about? The three kings of Orion's belt are pointing directly in a straight line to Sirius, the dog star. Dog spelled backwards is God. And it's the brightest star in the northern sky. And then the brightest star in the northern sky is then pointing directly in a straight line from the three kings of Orion's belt to the Southern Cross, the constellation of the Southern Cross. And they are in perfect alignment for 3 days. And there, Jesus, who was allegedly crucified upon a cross and was laid in the tomb for 2.5 days so that he could rise again. And then on December 25th, the whole magical process of the constellations in relation to the path of the sun and the moon begin to move again. And this time back towards the north, back towards life, back towards the rebirth of the spring equinox on March 21st. That's where this comes from. This is Christmas on December 25th. Santa Claus is your colostrum, which you have in your brain. The gift that Santa Claus gives you is the chrism oil. This is the greatest gift. It's better than a Sony Walkman or a Game Boy or an iPhone 7, whatever. It's the greatest gift of all time. And it comes to you 12 times a year, not just in the 12th month of the year. And that's the gift. And as soon as it comes in to the physical realm, which is our brain, it splits. Why does it split again? Because our entire reality is a polarity. It has to. So there we get the Chrism Oil splitting into the milk of Mary and the honey of Joseph.
Let me just come back to the rest of this process shortly, Charlie, but I just want to jump in with a couple of questions at this point. This process that you've talked about, it occurs naturally for 3 days, a month, 12 times a year.
Yes.
You were saying anyone can predict the days on which their own personal process will happen, right?
Yes, absolutely. Very easy, and I'll provide you with the link so you can provide that for everyone. And there's lots and lots of sites that you can quickly, easily go to. Just bookmark them, and it'll just it'll show you a calendar. You just enter in your birth date, and it'll show you the days. And and then they're just 3 days every single month, and they're pretty sequential.
Well. Awesome.
One month to another.
Can you trigger this process yourself at will, or do you just wait until it occurs naturally?
You can visit and have a relationship with God as Jacob. We'll get to this obviously later in the show today. But in Genesis, I mean, such a big portion of Genesis is the story of Jacob, Jacob's ladder, and Jacob going to a place called Peniel or Pineal, and there meeting God face to face. You can do this. You do not have to wait and only do this once a month by simply meditating yourself. But this process of the Chrism Oil is a very, very special process. And yes, this is the only time, and there is only during this time certain things happen. As we continue the story, Mark, it is just going to blow you away, because while a Chrism Oil is being gifted to us from on high by Santa Claus in the claustrum to the third ventricle of the brain, at the same time, the solar plexus, which is a representation of the sun, which is the ascended man, the sun god is Jesus Christ, the ascended man. It's any of us. If you do this process and successfully complete it, and you activate your crown chakra, your seventh chakra, and your skull illuminates, you have become Jesus Christ. That's what this entire process is about. This is what life is about. Woman, or man, this is who we are. This is why we're here, to live in a balanced, harmonious state between the physical and the non-physical. And like you said at the beginning of the show, Mark, the alchemical laboratory of science is the third ventricle of our brain. And this is how we do this, how we balance our non-physical and our physical. That's why we're here. And when you do, and you become this enlightened, ascended man, the bodhisattva who chooses to stay and share this knowledge and wisdom with others, you walk simultaneously within two realms, and you're gifted so many things. And we're going to get into this metaphysically and also scientifically through things like the release of serotonin and melatonin via the pineal gland, which are giving us, amongst other things, Mark, new blood and longer life. And I'll let you jump back in and we can continue.
Wow.
I know.
There's a whole load of Christians out there tearing their hair out and screaming at their screen right now.
and they should be, but they should be doing that with the priest class, because the priest class is what has lied to them. And remember, they're not really Christians, are they? They're followers of religious priests, of institutions, religious institutions, because they're not, I'll guarantee you, Christians are not following the word of God or Jesus. They say they are, but they are not. And if you read the Bible, reread it, and by the way, when you start reading it metaphysically, it's the greatest book in history. I can't put the Bible down because it is such a fascinating read once you start reading it the way it's meant to be read, as allegories, because it is the most sophisticated, complex passionate discussion of human physiology. Who are we? Why are we here? What are we supposed to do? It's all there on every single page of the Bible. It's staggering.
Yep. Now, the first thing many people might think of when they hear about monthly cycles within the human body is the female menstrual cycle. Is there any connection between what we're talking about here and women undergoing their periods?
There is not specifically to the Chrism oil and the seed that we're going to be talking about, because there's two things that are released. It's the Chrism oil and then a seed in the solar plexus, and the seed is baby Jesus that Joseph and Mary impregnate and bring life to. But all of these cycles, the monthly cycles that occur, these are all part of the sacred geometry in which we are constructed of. So yeah, they are connected because all of our systems within our body are all profoundly connected to one another, just like our five senses. You can hear through your smell, you can see through your smell, you can taste through your eyes, all of our cells do all of our senses, our physical senses can do all things. They can do all five of our senses because we are powerfully connected to every single aspect of our bodies. But in terms of any specific tangible connection, no, they're separate in that regard, but they are connected.
Okay. My wife often jokes that men have periods too. There's certain times in the month where we undergo changes as well. And this is going to sound very crude and profane. There's certain times in the month where I feel horny. I just feel like getting it on. And it seems to be cyclical. It seems to be, a certain point in every month. I wonder if I'm responding to this process that we're talking about without realizing it, or if it's something else.
No, not at all. And the other thing too is we need to, the thing that's the most important in the world right now, Mark, is, and the only way things are going to change is if we're honest. You're just being honest. And you shouldn't have to apologize for asking any question. We just need to be adults and understand that a lot of the feelings that we might have of what you're saying is somehow crude have only been enforced upon us by the church, by organized society, by public education. So we have to be honest. We have to ask these questions. And what you're saying, yes, you're absolutely right, because your entire body, to help you allow the Chrism oil to not get consumed and not essentially die during these 3 days, you must live a completely virtuous life for those 3 days. Now, this is what Colleen and I have undertaken full time. And we can get into this later or not. It's okay, or come back and talk about it later because there's so much to discuss in the future.
Sure.
With all of this, but life really in the physical comes down to two choices, and that is like I said, balance and harmony between the physical and non-physical, which is a virtuous life, the 7 heavenly virtues, or it is a complete succumbing to the out there, and the out there is the world ruled over by the moon goddess, the moon, magnetism. Magnetism shifts our energy. Electricity just fuels our cells, but it's the magnetism that shapes our actions, our thoughts, our movements, how we look, everything. And the magnetic moon. And so the moon goddess is called Sin. I wonder how many people know that. There's a temple of the moon goddess in India in a place called Ur of the Chaldees. And it's a fabulous, amazing temple to the moon. And it pays homage to the moon goddess Sin. And of course, there's no mistake or coincidence in this. The only sin that we can have as human beings is by living wholly in the left hemisphere of our brain, in the world of the carnal, in our lower 3 chakras, in the magnetic moon, where our 5 physical senses are ruled over by emotions. And that is the carnal world. And when you hear God in the Old Testament telling people like Moses to go to this town and to kill the firstborn of every household, or to instruct his minions to go to this town and to round up and kill all the women and children, but any of them who are virtuous, you can keep them alive and use them for your own sexual purposes or your own secret desires. If you take this literally, God is the sickest motherfucker you could ever imagine. I mean, This is
psychopathic despot.
It is. It's just sickening beyond belief. But when you understand the truth of all of this and how it connects everywhere in our reality, and that you understand it's an allegory, then what you come to realize is that he's not talking about physical people. The woman that, and the reason it's women is about his sin. That's what God is saying. He's saying, do not allow our carnal thoughts to multiply. So this is why kill the non-virtuous women. This is why kill the firstborn son of every household, so that carnal thoughts of people who are living in sin, which is the left hemisphere of our brain, which is pure emotion. We're just a complete chaotic mess, and we are. When we do that, that is what must be killed. And this, Mark, ties us into another oldie but a goodie with the church, the 10% tithing. The 10% that God talks about in the Bible is the left hemisphere of the brain. Yep, it's the same size as the right hemisphere. But guess what? Your facts, figure, and logic-driven left hemisphere of the brain is only 10% of the brain's capacity. And this is why you get these little convenient stories from science that say, we're only ever using 10% of our brains. Did you know that? 10% of our brains. Right. Because we live exclusively in our lower three chakras, the carnal world, the left hemisphere of the brain. The right hemisphere of the brain is God, and that is 90%. And so that's what God is saying in the Bible. The 10% tithing, give me your 10%. God is saying, give me your carnal mind. Give me the left hemisphere of your brain, and I will give you the world. And that is the right hemisphere of the brain. And everything in the Bible is an allegory for ascending upwards and going to the right. Cast thy net to the right if you wish to catch fish. Jesus isn't talking about eating animals. There's people, Christians all the time say, oh, I eat the meat and it's all good eating and it's all great because God and Jesus were hunters and they're fishermen. And no, the fish is a representation of Pisces. Pisces is the constellation and it means wisdom. If you wish to catch wisdom, cast thy net to the right. The right is the right hemisphere of the brain because it leads you to the pineal gland. It leads you to God face to face, as Jacob said in Genesis.
Let me just clear up a point here. When we're talking about the right side of the brain, are we talking about the right as it's experienced by the individual themselves rather than somebody looking on at them? Just a small point.
Yes, what we're talking about is you looking out. So here we are sitting in front of the TV.
So your own right. As
my own right. My own right. That is exactly correct. Yes. Yeah. Okay, my own right is the right hemisphere of the brain, which is 90% of the brain's capacity. And it's not being used because organized society tells us it's evil, it's bad, it's wrong. And that's how organized society works. And this is how you know that everything I'm sharing with you today is the absolute truth, because everything that organized society does, and I remember that we talked about team organized society, schools, Hollywood, TV, NASA, religion, politicians, they're all in it together. They're all doing the same thing. Don't think, don't relax, stay out there chaotic. What does the Big Bang do? It says there's no God, and it says you're just a worthless speck of dust, and don't worry about it. Isn't that what they say to us all the time, Mark, when things are looking so bad and there's so many corrupt priests raping children and so many corrupt politicians raping children? Boy, isn't that a coincidence? and everyone is just so corrupt. And then they go, but relax, just remember, you're a speck of dust.
Yep.
And you're so small, we can't even chart you on a graph. Don't worry about it.
You just don't matter. You're just random. You're just an accident of happenstance. You're going into oblivion when you leave here anyway, so there's no point to anything. So just do what you want in life and, enjoy yourself.
And the reality is we are eternal. And the reality is we come back. And we'll continue to come back and back and back around the great circle of the samsara again and again and again, and be victims again and again and again, until at one of these times around the wheel, we finally go, do you remember that podcast that Mark Devlin and that weird guy from Mexico did? Do you remember that? That was like 4 lifetimes ago, but I kind of remember that. It's like an epiphanal experience, but maybe we should try that. And then that's the exit. And by the way, in the great Hindu and Buddhist or Eastern philosophy traditions of the samsara, the circle of life, which is birth, life, death, rebirth, there's the escape route, which is called the moksha. And the moksha is to the right. It's an escape pod to the right. And what that is ascending to the 7th chakra, illuminating your crown chakra. And I'll just quickly throw this out there once again, more Christmas fun for you. Why do the king and queen, your beloved king and queen, the great British king and queen who are having their little children
German.
right now? German, that's right. That's right. The German king and queen. They wear crowns because the tradition of a king and queen is not a hereditary genetic bloodline. That's ridiculous. It is the leader of communities, and the leader of communities are those who are the ascended men and women. Ancient tradition in ancient Egypt as well. That's why women and men ruled jointly, and they were not hereditary. These were the chosen ones, the ones who went into the pyramid, who went into these deprivation chambers, shut off everything else so that they could ascend upwards into the 6th chakra of the body, the last in-body chakra, which is the third eye chakra, and go to the right, illuminate the pineal gland, and then meet God face to face and illuminate the 7th chakra. Remember, the 7th chakra is above the skull, above Calvary, above Golgotha, above the skull. That's the crown chakra. And that's why, folks, when you see all those pictures of Jesus Christ and of Mithra and of Krishna and of Buddha, they all have that illumination around their skulls. That's the crown of the ascended man, because their 7th chakra, the crown chakra, is illuminated. And that's what the king and queen are supposed to be. Ascended beings who stay with us to help guide all of us to good health, to good wisdom, and to the truth by going within.
Right. It's a little bit different to that in our reality, isn't it, in terms of what they represent?
Upside down.
Yeah. Well, you're on fire today, man. There's so many pieces being put together in my mind. And something which did come to mind when you're talking about everything happening to the right-hand side, is my research into the corporate entertainment industry, where you've got so many celebrities being pictured covering their right eye. Mm-hmm. They cover it with their hand, they put a hat over it, they're in shadow, they put some hair over it. It's always the right eye, leaving the left eye exposed. So it's like they're announcing they've chosen the left-hand path.
Brilliant.
i.e. the one that leads away from true enlightenment to the opposite, which is being trapped in ego-based, 5-sense-based consciousness. And that's where these people are trying to lead everyone else to, with their example, because people look up to celebrities and emulate their behaviours. And something that really came to me just recently was, you remember that Beyonce song, Irreplaceable, a few years ago?
Yes.
At the start of the song, the hook goes, to the left, to the left.
To the left, to the left. To the left, to the left. To the left, to the left. Everything you own in the box
So ostensibly in the lyrics, she's kicking out her boyfriend and she's saying, everything you own in a box to the left, take all your shit with you, you know. So you think that's what the song is about. She's saying it's in that box to the left. But she keeps repeating this refrain, to the left, to the left. She's announcing it. She's announcing that she's chosen the left-hand path, and she's encouraging and enticing people listening to her records to do the same. Isn't it incredible when you finally come to these understandings about what's been right in front of us in plain sight all this time?
You are one of those truthers who goes where the truth is no matter what. And you nailed it completely. This is exactly why. And I'm just putting the finishing touches on. It'll be finished today and released for tomorrow. And it's a 2-hour podcast on symbolism and how the truth movement, we're doing the work for organized society. Because we look at what these stars are doing and we're saying that it's evil. And hey, listen, their intentions are evil, absolutely. But the symbology that they're doing is God's sacred geometry. It's God's sacred symbolism. There is nothing evil about showing the single eye. There is no single eye of the Illuminati. There's just the third eye, the pineal of the human creation, and the 666 with their fingers, and how 666 is from the Bible itself, a mark of a beast. No, it's not. The Bible, in the same sentence, 666, it says the mark of a beast and of a man. It's the choice in the moment. And remember, number 6 is referring to the human purpose to ascend. There are 6 in-body chakras. And that's our entire purpose. The entire purpose of man is the number 6, to ascend upwards to the number 6, hoping to complete the scale at 7.
It's always will and intent, isn't it? You know, if this knowledge of this science was in the hands of a group that wished to uplift and enlighten all of humanity, that would be one thing. You put that knowledge in the hands of a nefarious, malevolent, psychopathic control system that wants to enslave everyone else, and that's a whole different process. It's a whole different paradigm. So either option is available, like you were talking about earlier, these polarities. There always has to be choice available to us under free will. So it can be one thing or the other. So the numbers and the symbols in their base state are neutral. They're waiting to have meaning and energy applied to them according to whatever the motive is of those that are going to be using them.
Right, and they lied to us. So, for example, the devil horns and the covering of the right eye to show the left eye, and the AOK sign, which is just 666, and then the other one is they're all showing the pyramid. And so now what's happening is that we're all coming to be suspicious of pyramids. Bad. Ancient Egyptians, bad. Somehow Illuminati, I don't know what, but bad. And 666, bad. All of these things are not bad. They're actually beautiful because they're all God's creation. And again, 6 plus 6 plus 6 is 18. In all ancient languages, including ancient Hebrew, the number 18 is a representation of chi, which is energy, our life force. That is how we exist. This is a pretty positive thing. That 6 plus 6 plus 6 is 18. 1 plus 8 for 18, 1 plus 8 is 9. Number 9 is consciousness. That's what we're working to. Number 6 in our body is to ascend upwards, right? And then 7 is the crown chakra. 8 is eternity. It's to take what we do by activating the crown chakra and make it eternal, so we never go back. We stay the enlightened man, the ascended man. We stay bodhisattvas. Number 8. Number 9 is when we become pure consciousness, when we have connected to God and we are always in connection with God, and we activate our 6th and 7th senses. Everyone knows about the 5 physical senses. Almost nobody knows about our 6th and 7th senses. The 6th sense, intuition. The 7th sense, telepathy. And these are non-physical senses, and they're very powerful and they're very real, but they only work in the right hemisphere of the brain. And if you're living in carnal emotion all the time in the left hemisphere, they won't activate. And so we think they're not real because we hardly have access to them. And one other thing, I just want to put this in here to follow up your genius of decoding this, Mark. The recent phenomenon with these scumbag celebrities is this new black eye club, right? And everyone who's famous for the Illuminati have black eyes. But guess what? It's their left eyes. Everyone who has a black eye has their left eyes blackened. Their left eyes blackened.
Remember the artist Lisa Left Eye Lopez, who died in some very strange circumstances in 2002 out of the group TLC? Her artist name was Left Eye, and she always had paint on her face beneath her left eye. Right. And who are these? Now, it's all the usual celebrities, Brad Pitt and Angelina. They've all got all these Hollywood stars, Madonna. They've all got their left eyes, and it's all their left eyes. But who else? The Queen. And this will all be in my podcast that I'm releasing tomorrow on symbolism. You'll see the picture of the Queen in public with her left eye, black and blue. With Prince Philip, there's more times that Prince Philip is out in public with a black and left eye than there are when he doesn't have a black and left eye. It's unbelievable. Wow, you're absolutely right. Looks like they've had a domestic and she's thrown a breadboard at him or something. It's always got that black eye. George Bush, black and left. George W. Bush, black and left eye. Bill Clinton, black and left eye. Barack Obama, black and left eye. Guess what? Pope Francis, black and left eye. Who was the evil pope just before Francis? Everyone called him the pope before Francis, black and left eye. Benedict. Go to the business world. The most Richard Branson, black and left eye. Go to all of the politics world, Council of Foreign Relations, John Kerry. All of these people, black and left eye, black and left eye, black and left eye. And Dave Rockefeller. That's right. And so all the symbology that you just decoded, it's the same thing. Why is the left eye black? Because it's violence. It's a violent act. They're symbolizing that they've chosen the left-hand path. Exactly. So, folks, what we're telling you today about the precious Chrism oil, and only available in the right hemisphere of the brain, and the whole Bible is telling you, the entire Bible is telling you to go to God, which is in the right hemisphere of the brain. This is our reality. This is the war that I was telling you at the top of the show. You look at the Freemason symbol of the compass and the square, creating a female womb with their letter G, God. That's their false God inside. And this is the war. They're killing our God for their God. Their God doesn't exist. So everything that they give us doesn't exist. It's a lie. It's an illusion. They're selling us nothing but lies. And that's why they're doing it. And that's the left eye symbology. And the right is God. Right. When we were talking about numbers earlier, you said number 9 very slowly. So I'm going to reverse the recording of that and see if it comes out saying, "Turn me on, dead man." Be kind of interesting if it does. Number 9, number 9. Also, with regard to the numbers, we were talking about the sixes there. And you said, there's nothing evil about 666. But isn't it interesting that when you get into the traditional atheistic, scientific, heliocentric model and all these facts and figures that we're given about the supposed dimensions and movements of the Earth, by the way, folks, it doesn't move. You find sixes encoded in that all the time. Sixes, 666,000, all these different permutations of 6. Just keeps on coming up. So there's something going on there, it strikes me. And what it is this. And so remember what I said. In that passage in the Bible where it says that 666 is the mark of the beast, in the same sentence, in the same passage, it also says it is the representation of a man. So what is being encoded to us there in that passage is that 666 is a representation of the carnal man. And we have a choice. If we stay in the left
666 is the mark of the beast, and it's evil. And that's why the earth is rotating around the sun at 66.6 thousand miles per hour. 666, it's just 3 sixes in a row, and it's evil.
Gee, what were the chances?
That's right. And it's only evil if we go to the left. And which way did they tell us that the earth rotates around the sun? We go in a left motion,
Beyonce again, to the left, to the left.
To the left, to the left, to the left. Now think about this. I blew a whole bunch of my friends and followers away the other day because I let for a future podcast I let this out of the bag with regard to JFK. All of these people who are telling the truth and who society kills, and JFK, RFK, MLK, all through this history, the ones
John Lennon, Bob Marley,
the ones that they had to kill, they're killing publicly because they have to show you that the left always wins, and they're taking out the right. So now think John Kennedy. John Kennedy was in Dallas, Texas. Why Dallas? Because it exists on the 33rd parallel. We'll get into this later. There's nothing evil about 33. It's the end of the spine. It's the end of the physical realm, the left hemisphere of the brain, and it's the start of the brain, the right hemisphere of the brain. That's what Dallas, Texas is all about. 33 is all about. That's why Kennedy was killed in Dallas, because he had to be on the 33rd parallel, the 33rd vertebrae. And
on 2211.
That's right, on 2211. And then which way in Dealey Plaza, which is a Freemason park, by the way, and there's got the penis, the phallic symbol right at the entrance. When JFK came down Main Street, he's looking straight at the Freemason, the Illuminati penis staring right at him. Which direction does JFK's limousine go to when he gets to Dealey Plaza? It goes to the right. Why does it go to the right? Because JFK was an ascended man creating peace, and he and Khrushchev were in secret channels consistently since the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they were taking down the apparatus, getting rid of even just a military outside of the United States. He was going to bring everything back domestically and get out of this insanity. And so Kennedy goes to the right in Dealey Plaza. He then makes the hairpin turn to the left, which puts him in the sniper's nest, where there's probably at least 3, if not 4 teams that are going to take him out. And the shot that kills him, the shot that blows his head off, where does it hit him? It hits him in the right temple of the skull. The right temple of the skull. You can't make this shit up. It is so perfect in its understanding.
Wow.
They are saying to us, you ascended people, we will take you out. We will shoot you from the left into the right side. And where? The right temple. And it blew his precious skull apart. Because
Oswald sure was a good shot.
Yeah. And then Kennedy's head, in the movie, the JFK movie, they make it such a big thing. Back and to the left. Back and to the left.
Yeah, you're right. That's a key line from that movie.
It is the key line to the movie, because they're telling you, like the Black Eye Club, when everyone's got a left black eye, that the power of the left wins. That's the small G, Freemason G inside the compass in the square, inside the false womb of humanity, selling us all these lies. And so, folks, everything is left brain versus right brain. And they know this, and that's why everything they do is encoded in symbols. And all these false flags, they're all taking these names that with gematria, all these crazed people who are supposedly doing this, in gematria, their names are always coming out to Jesus Christ. They're always turning up with the number 33. They're showing you in plain sight that they are not allowing us to go to the right. And that's why society is on 24/7. It's 365, never turns off, so that you never calm down. You never relax. You never start deep breathing, and you don't freaking meditate.
Wow.
Yep.
Mind getting blown.
Yep.
Let's go back to this internal alchemical process then that we started talking about. We definitely got into the first part of that process, and we came across things like the claustrum being symbolic of Santa Claus, which is why this whole thing encodes Christmas, or Christmas encodes it. The Chrism Oil, or the Christos in Greek, which is symbolic of what we think of as Christ, or what's come to be known as Jesus. But this process continues, right? So the oil starts its journey downwards, down the vertebrae, down the spine to the solar plexus, and then there's a second part of the process where it ascends back up. So let's go back to that, and do you want to just continue the story of what goes on in the rest of this process?
You bet. So where we left off was that the Chrism Oil was split to the feminine, the magnetic, negatively charged, easy to spoil milk of Mary, and the preserved golden honey positive electrical Joseph. And then they go down and around the spine. That's because they go down, because if you didn't know this, the two major nerves in the body, the Ida and the Pingala, are actually connected. That's where they begin. They begin in the third ventricle of the brain, and where do they end? In the sacrum. Human physiology. It's what the Bible is about, from the crown of the skull to the sacrum. So the Pingala, easy to remember, folks, Pingala nerve is connected to pineal. Pineal, Pingala. And that's where the golden preserved honey goes down. And the Ida, IDA, is connected to the pituitary gland, and that's where Mary's magnetic milk goes down. And like the coiled snake, they go back and forth down the 33 vertebrae of the spine, and they make their way all the way down to the sacrum. And there is a place, and this is not, again, theory, this is actual provable science. In our sacral region, there is a place called the Sacral Plexus, and the Sacral Plexus just means sacred place. And in our sacrum, on the front side of it, facing, say, towards our belly button, there is actually in our sacrum a little depression, a little hollow, and this is where the Ida and the Pingala eventually end. They end down in the sacrum, and this is where the magnetic Mary and the honey of Joseph make their way down to. When they get to the sacrum, at the same time, a seed is produced in the solar plexus, and the solar plexus is just on our upper stomach, and it is a straight line down to the sacral plexus. And 12 times a year, there is a seed. The seed has always been known as baby Jesus, or the baby Christos. And this actual seed, which is produced in the solar plexus, goes straight down. And where do you think it rests? Where does it rest its precious little head? In the manger of the sacral plexus. I mean, this is staggering stuff. There's a little depression there, and the seed sits in this little depression, and it waits. It waits for Mary and Joseph to come and to fertilize the seed. Okay, as soon as it does, the seed is born. The baby Jesus is alive, and the baby Jesus then begins its journey up the actual spine. This time it's in the spine as the cerebral spinal fluid, the CSF, that is in the spine. There's no blood in the spine, just this precious fluid that goes up. So the CSF carries this now fertilized seed, which is the baby Jesus. And the baby Jesus climbs up our 33 vertebrae. And we have 32 vertebrae that are stacked on top of one another. And then the 33rd and final vertebrae at the very top is a capstone. And it's a cap. And it's called Atlas. Go figure. And what does Atlas do?
Carries
Atlas
the world on his shoulders.
carries the world on his shoulders. The strongest bone in the human body, this great strong man that's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, that's the 33rd vertebrae. And this is where the level 33 in Freemasonry comes from. It's all based on the Bible. It's all based on ancient sacred geometry of God. That's what Freemasonry is. It's not inherently evil. It's been turned to evil purposes for sure, but it's not inherently evil. They're basing everything is just based on the singular truth of God's creation. And so now Jesus makes his way up to Atlas, and Atlas, the strongest bone of the body, is also in our body between the end of our physical bodies, very strong, and up into this other part, which is the skull. And by the way, folks, cavalry means skull. Golgotha means skull. Where was Jesus crucified? At a place called Calvary, at Golgotha. They both literally mean skull. So here's this incredible thing. The fertilized seed of God is now, of Jesus Christ within our body, is now kind of stuck at Atlas because this is, the physical spine is very strong and it needs help. It needs help to be able to cross over from our physical bodies into the magic of the interior realm of our brains. And it gets help. It gets help through something called the pneumogastric nerve ganglion. And it's also known as, and probably easier for you to remember, as the vagus nerve. And what the vagus nerve, pneumogastric, pneumo for lung, gastric for stomach, once again, this won't shock you at all. They start at the pineal and the pituitary glands, and then these nerve ganglion, they run down over top of the cerebellum, the heart of the brain, and they go down to the lungs and to the stomach. And this vagus nerve, the pneumogastric ganglion of nerves, helps through an electromagnetic charge, helps the fertilized seed of baby Jesus to jump essentially through Atlas, the 33rd vertebrae of the human spine, up into the brain. And this, my friends, is called crucifixion. And guess what? Crucifixion does not mean being nailed to a cross with your wrists and your ankles. That is not what a crucifixion is. The literal definition of a crucifixion is to ascend 1,000-fold. And this is what every ancient culture wrote about. It's what they all talked about. The pneumogastric nerves helps the baby Jesus seed to ascend 1,000-fold. Now, this is where the story just gets. If you think that's freaking amazing, wait. Where does it ascend into? It ascends into a part of the brain called the fourth ventricle. And this is right in the medulla oblongata, just past the pons. And it is an incredibly small and straight and narrow path. And the fourth ventricle is called the path of the straight and narrow. This is how we're supposed to live. Remember, we were talking about this is who we are, what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to live a virtuous, straight and narrow life, and it's encoded in our brain. So miraculously, the vagus nerve makes or helps the seed of Jesus to jump out of the physical body into the brain, into the fourth ventricle, and it goes through this cranial aqueduct from the fourth ventricle. This is what connects the fourth ventricle to the third ventricle, is this cranial aqueduct. So there's a little aqueduct of the CSF, the spinal fluid, and it takes the seed and it goes right into the very center of our brains. And remember, we said the third ventricle is where all the magic happens. In the very center is the thalamus. And the thalamus receives this fertilized seed of baby Jesus, and guess what happens? The thalamus literally does. It does. This is again not theory. It does. It lights up the thalamus, and this is where this is why the thalamus has always been known as the light of the world. The light of the world. And when you're looking at the ancient Egyptian eye in the sky symbol, where you see very famously, like on the Alan Parsons cover, it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous in society, the eye in the sky. The big eye that you see in the middle is the illuminated thalamus. The eyebrow above it is the corpus callosum, which is marking the end of the third ventricle of the brain above it. And then the stems down below, what you're seeing is the medulla oblongata and the path of the straight and narrow. And you're literally seeing the pineal gland and the pituitary gland as part of the eye in the sky as well. So this fertilized seed goes through the fourth ventricle, through the cranial aqueduct, and is deposited in the thalamus, lights it up, the light of the world. Okay.
All these phrases we're familiar with, there's a group called Light of the World. There was a 70s funk group. And then the straight and narrow, when somebody's released from prison and they're behaving themselves so they don't go back, they're said to be on the straight and narrow. You got the eye in the sky. All these terms that we use every day, and nobody has any idea where they come from.
And it's all coming from the one singular truth, which is God's creation, right? That's where all of this comes from. It all comes from the singular truth of God's creation. That's why this is so important. So what happens when the seed is now illuminated in the thalamus? This is freaking amazing, because the baby, Jesus, who's now 33 years old, that's why Jesus lived to 33 years, because he went through the 33 vertebrae of the spine. That's why Jesus dies at the age of 33, because he's crucified at a place called Calvary, which is the skull, right? Golgotha, the skull. This is why the story is this way. If all of this isn't true, then why is it all written this way, folks? And encoded everywhere. Because if you look at a map of the Holy Land, where they're fighting all the time,
yes,
that's what the Sea of Galilee is. It's the human skull. That's what the Jordan River is. It's the spine. That's what the Dead Sea is. The Dead Sea. I was
going to ask you that. That's amazing. When I heard that on your video, we live in a world of microcosms and macrocosms, as above, so below. The Hermetic principle of correspondence. And when you mentioned the geography of the land of Israel appears to encode this process, that's just awesome, amazing. The Sea of Galilee is the skull, right? The twisting River Jordan. I was actually baptized in the River Jordan in 1993, folks. Not a lot of people know that. I've never mentioned that before. But back then, I used to believe that I was a born-again Christian. Didn't know any of this stuff, of course. And I visited the Holy Land, so-called, that year, and got baptized in the River Jordan. And that's symbolized in the spine. And then you've got the Dead Sea representing the torso, right?
It's the sacrum, and it's shaped like our sacrum as well, and it's where the waters are all gummed up and they don't move anymore, and that's the sacrum. That's where they trap us with our lower carnal mind. The lower three chakras, our root chakra is in the sacrum. We can't get out of there. And that's where, remember I said the 5 fused vertebrae are of the sacrum? That's our 5 physical senses, and that's why our 5 physical senses lead us to temptation again and again and again, because our low energy is all trapped down in the Dead Sea. That's why it's called the Dead Sea, because when we live there, we're walking dead. What do they call that? What are all these movies made of these days? The Living Dead, The Walking Dead,
Zombie apocalypse.
Zombie apocalypse. They're making fun of you. They're laughing at you in plain sight. The Dead Sea there is no movement, no circulation. And that's your magnetic energy of the Kundalini, of the 7 chakras, 6 in your body and the crown chakra. You never get to the heart chakra. You never get to the throat chakra. You never get to the third eye chakra. And you will never get to your crown chakra if you cannot raise your Kundalini magnetic energy up out of the sacrum, the Dead Sea. And if this isn't the truth, then why do all of us from time to time just act like the living dead? And that's why all these movies, folks, exist about zombies. They're laughing at you. The left brain keeps you in your lower 3 chakras.
And you know, about that, Charlie, when you think about the average McDonald's eating, X Factor watching, Pepsi drinking, fluoridated, CNN believing members of society, you don't really think of these people activating their pineal glands. You don't really think of these types of people being enlightened in any way and undergoing any kind of spiritual experience, because they're so dumbed down, and many of them are dumbed down willfully, it would seem, because they just have no interest in embracing truth. So even with these types of people, this process is going on within them every month, but they have no idea that it is, right? So if you don't know how to harness it, it just goes on unnoticed, and there's no value to it.
The Chrism oil will die within the first 24 hours. It cannot exist in acidosis. It cannot exist in a hyperacid body. So as soon as the Chrism oil is produced in these people, like you described, eating this
some
horrific.
Some fat guy sat there drinking beer, watching the game. It's all going on, but it goes nowhere.
It dies. It dies within the first 24 hours, and it is such a shame. And this is, and another thing, folks, and this is a whole other podcast, and I'm going to be doing one shortly, the symbolism, and it needs to be said, and I'll just quickly put it here. Cancer isn't what they're telling you. Cancer, there is no such thing as cancer per se, and what cancer cells are, folks, are acidosis, cells that are existing in a state of hyperacidity. And what happens when the cells, our cells, and that's all we are just cells, our cells in a state of hyperacidity cannot breathe. They cannot function. And the cells have 5 functions, breathing and respiring and eating and then, depositing and then, reproducing. The only thing that a cell in a diseased state of a hyperacidity can do is divide. So why is it that these cancer cells spread so fast and they're just spreading? Because they can't breathe in a state of acidity and they'll die. So what these acidosis cells do is they quickly split, and then they can't breathe because your whole body is in a state of hyperacidity. So they split and they split and they split and they split. And this is all cancer is, folks, is just splitting. And we have now donated over $1 trillion of our hard-earned fake monopoly money to the various cancer societies around the world, to various pink ribbon organizations for women's breast cancer. And all these organizations are left eye organizations, and they're all sponsored by the meat and dairy industries. Everything, it's all part of team organized society. We are not meant to eat meat. We are not meant to consume dairy. Meat and dairy are death to us, but not just physically, metaphysically, because we absolutely are tied and connected to these poor animals, and they know what's happening to them in advance of dying. Don't kid yourselves. When they are being led to the slaughter, that entire day they go through hell because they are smart. They're not dumb. Cows are incredibly intuitive beings, and they know what's going to happen to them, and they suffer in the worst way. And this is why all these people that work in these slaughterhouses suffer from shell shock, post-traumatic stress disorder that they say that all these soldiers have. They're suffering because they're murderers and they've got death on their hands. And when we shop in supermarkets, bullshit, they're not supermarkets, they're death markets. Even the fruits and vegetables in death markets aren't even real. They pick them when they're green. God's great secretions, hormones, and creations are not even passed through the stem into these fruits and vegetables. And most times they won't even ripen on their own, so they have to add a chemical, or they put color on your fruits and vegetables to make them look palatable. They're dead foods. This is what society does. It works around the clock, nonstop, to ensure that you keep your body in a state of acidity. Why? So that the chrism oil will die within you, no matter what you do in the first 24 hours. And that's why all of this is tied to the path of the straight and narrow and the 7 heavenly virtues. We have got to start living virtuous lives. And that doesn't mean you can't have fun. It's all about fun, but it's all about fun in loving and helping everybody else, not taking advantage of everybody else. Don't get scared by this, folks. A virtuous life does not mean you walk around like some closed off saint. You are a human being. And like Mark said earlier, you have manly desires because they're put there by God. You're supposed to. Don't feel bad about it. There's nothing wrong about it. Just don't hurt people. Ahimsa. No matter what you do in your life in the search of your truth, great. Just don't hurt any living creation in what you're doing. And this is why we are trained from birth to eat meat and dairy, to kill the chrism oil. Folks, I'm not kidding. Everything is right brain versus left brain. And the eating of animals and dairy products is designed so that you cannot raise your chrism oil. Because if we do, it's over for them.
Wow. On a roll today, man. On a roll with all this. I love the term team organised society as well. It just sums everything up. You come to realise that our entire reality that we live in has been structured to be this way by others of ill intent. None of it is random. None of it is by accident. It's all meant to be this way. And, the truth about cancer and cancerous cells thriving in an acidic body. Another thing they forgot to tell us about at university. Darn it. Damn. Just slipped their mind to, mention that in academia.
Yeah, and like George Carlin says, I mean, we give, and we give, and we give. We see starving children in Africa, which could be saved by one of these rich motherfuckers that we see, in their suits and ties on Wall Street. Just they could cut one check and all of that's taken care of, because these are brilliant, smart, wise people. They just need potable water and they'll do the rest. Right. But, they need vaccinations, to kill them. Jeez, you have to be kidding me.
They need Bill Gates and Bono to go down there. That will sort it all out.
Bill Gates and Bono. And it all ties back in. Bill Gates and Bono with vaccinations. You know how that ties back into doctors, hospital rooms, and the birth of babies? Do you know what the pharmaceutical companies teach at university to do with pregnant or with mothers giving birth in hospitals? Soon as that baby is born, they clamp off the umbilical cord. And then as soon as they can, they sever the umbilical cord from the placenta, and then they chuck the whole thing away. Do you know that the umbilical cord stays connected to the placenta for hours after the birth? And that there's a reason why that in those hours after the birth, that placenta is our natural vaccination process by God. That is giving us everything we need for any kind of infection that might come along. That's why they clamp it off. That's why they cut it from the placenta. That's why they throw the placenta out and make that whole process yucky, right? And then babies when they're born, we got to make sure that they don't choke and die. We need to make sure they're alive, so we have to hit them. Oh, really?
Get all that fluid off their lungs, yeah.
Yeah, a violent act, a violent act, violence. And then we take their tonsils out, and then we have to give them all of these vaccines, and then when they need booster shots, it's just...
And if you're Jewish, you get your goddamn foreskin cut off.
Yeah, or even if you're not, it's just a great thing to do to your child is just constantly cause them pain and force them into the left brain.
It's hygienic, don't you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. How have you come across all this information, man? There's a whole wealth of stuff here. How has all this stuff come across your radar, and how have you filtered it all through to How have you put it through some kind of filtration system to know that what you're dealing with is absolute truth here?
Well, it's all part of searching for the truth. This is why you're having a show on it, because you're authentic and you're searching for the truth. It's through reading your books and coming to see how everything is organized, stacked up against this, and it's all tied together. And really, the biggest thing, and you're a believer in it as well, and it's not a believer, it's a knower. We know the earth is flat. And folks, if you're on the fence with this, it only means you're on the fence because you haven't done your own research.
Someone just got triggered.
Yep. Anyone who does the research into flat earth will come to realize the earth is flat and it's stationary, and that everything we exist within electromagnetic ether. That's what the firmament is. The firmament is the magnetic barrier that holds all of our electricity in. Nikola Tesla knew this. He wrote about this. He talked about downward causation of electricity. And he said that is what the Einstein and these modern scientists were calling gravity. It's just the natural downward causation of electricity from the firmament above through the ether. Flat Earth leads you to the fact that all of this is elegant design. And then once you realize that this is just stunning creation by someone or something, it leads you to God. And then you go, okay, but God's like just full of shit, right? And the Bible is just full of shit. It's just these are the worst things, the worst creations. And then it leads you to someone like Santos Bonacci. And then you watch one thing of Santos and you just go, wow. And then you watch something of a gentleman named Bill Donahue. People, if you haven't seen Bill Donahue, all of his earliest videos, before he goes into NASA and space, are just staggering decoding the Bible. I've seen his stuff. And it's incredible. And then Eric Dubay. Eric Dubay is talking about Bill Donahue. Eric Dubay is talking about Santos Bonacci. Eric Dubay is talking about the colostrum. And when you research flat Earth, trust me, you'll find the right people. And you will go down these ventricles, these chimneys, and they will lead you to your third ventricle of your brain. And that's what Colleen and I did. And that's the hallmark of any authentic seeker for the truth, is you're just constantly changing, you're constantly growing, you don't stay. And what we're finding is that so many people in the truth movement is that, I really believe in 9/11 and chemtrails, and that's where I'm going to stay because 9/11 and chemtrails is what it's all about. It isn't. 9/11 and chemtrails are all about cutting you off from God. It leads you to God. And the fastest way to get there is through flat Earth, because that's God's creation. And like I said, in the Holy Land, if you look at these pictures from the sky looking down, the Sea of Galilee doesn't just sort of look like a skull. It's shaped perfectly like a human head. The River Jordan, it goes down just like the spine. The Dead Sea is shaped just like the sacrum. It's just absolutely staggering. And that's why the war between Israel and the Palestinians, or whomever else they want, will never end there, because they don't want Mark Devlin being baptized in the Jordan River. They don't want any of you to go visit the Holy Land and see this miraculous creation for yourself. They don't want you to see this.
And it's no accident all that madness and destruction and violence is happening in that part of the world specifically.
Well, that's why they put, and again, this here, boy, let's add this to the list of offending people. This is why they put Israel there. You need to remember, folks, the only historical reference or validation that there was an ancient country or ancient nation state or place called Israel is from the Bible. And now we're telling you the Bible is an allegory. And Israel is Isis, Amun-Ra, and El, which is the sun god. So it's the Holy Trinity. It's the creation of eternal life. and it's not real. And in the Bible, it says that it's the only it's the only proof that there is a ancient genetic race of people called Jews. And in the Bible, this is what it says. A Jew is someone who seeks for God within. In other words, a Jew is one who meditates. So we're being told that the reason that the nation state of Israel is right there and had to be put there is because, well, it was always there. There's always these white people in amongst all of these Arab people, forever. And nobody knows how that's possible, but, it was. And that the people who are there are called Jews, and that's all there is to it. There are no such thing as a genetic race of Jews, and I know that that's going to be hard for some people
That's a whole different show. That's a whole story in itself.
It is, but it's also true. A Jew is someone who meditates and goes within. Israel is the name Jesus gave to Jacob in Genesis, the very beginning of the Bible, when Jacob climbs Jacob's ladder, crosses the river alone, leaves his family, his carnal world behind, the left brain. He crosses the river to the right, and there he wrestles a manifestation for an entire day. That's his ego. He wrestles with his carnal mind for a day. And when Jacob finishes wrestling with his carnal ego for a day, God visits, manifestation, an angel of God visits Jacob and says, congratulations, essentially, and I will give you a new name. And that name is Israel. And that means the eternal creation of the ascended man. So Israel is the name for our Holy Trinity, the Mother, the Father, and the child, Jesus Christ, the ascended man, and that we are the ascended man. And when we cross the river to the right, wrestle our ego, and meet God face to face, as Jacob says in Genesis, and we meet God face to face in a place called Pineal, that's when we become Jesus Christ. That's when we take the name Israel. Israel is not a nation state. It's the name God gave to Jacob when he crossed the river to the right, ascended, defeated his carnal mind, ascended to the right hemisphere of the brain, and met God face to face in a place called Pineal. Holy shit.
So let's see. We've pissed off meat eaters, Zionists, heliocentrists, and Orthodox Christians. Is there anyone we've left out? That's not bad for one show, really.
I know, but and isn't it kind of interesting, right? That the truth of our reality is the opposite of what we all hold as the truth in this sick society. So what we're telling you today is the complete upside down opposite of what the small g of the Freemason compass and square, creating the artificial womb and the fake God. You have to choose, folks. You have to choose what side you want to be on.
And so often the messenger gets attacked in all this stuff. I get this all the time with my music industry stuff. People just lay into me and they want to argue with me all day long. And I always say to them, look, it's not me that made it this way. I didn't make the music industry satanic. I'm just telling you that it is. If you want to get mad at those parties that made it this way, not someone that's trying to alert you to the fact. But the messenger is always an easy target.
Yeah, they are. And let's just remember, folks, that the so-called historical figure of Jesus Christ just happens to be the 82nd rendition of the sun god, ascended man, just in the Mediterranean alone. That's not even including Krishna and Buddha and anything anywhere else, or Quetzalcoatl. That's just in the Mediterranean region. And why are there 82 Jesus Christ or Yeshuas that came first before the Christos? Because they're all telling the same story, folks. There's one truth, and this is the truth. And if it hurts you or offends you, maybe you're just not ready for it right now, but it's still the truth. As Gandhi famously said, no matter what, find the truth, hold the truth, because it is the truth, even if you are in a minority of one. And I exist to share this information. What you think of me, it doesn't matter, because I have gone within, because I have met God face to face, and because I have a relationship, and I understand that the purpose to this life is to seek the truth and be happy. And I'm just sharing this information. If you want to think that I'm a kook or whatever, free will.
All right, man. As we start to wrap things up then, just bringing it back to the occasion of Christmas and keeping it topical down to the time that we're recording this. The symbolism and the rituals behind the time of year that we think of as Christmas seem to be a kind of hybridized hodgepodge of different influences. So you've got this internal alchemical process, as we mentioned. Interesting that you've got the claustrum involved in that, and we have Santa Claus, and very interesting that Santa turns out to be an anagram of Satan, but I'm sure that's just a coincidence and nothing to worry about. So then on top of that, you've got the winter solstice, which you mentioned earlier. Obviously, the mechanics of that are encoded into the whole festival of Christmas. The symbolic death of the sun on the 21st of December. It's seen to die, in inverted commas, for 3 days. Then it rises again on Christmas Day. Then you've got some elements of ancient shamanic tribes in Northern Europe who used to gather a particular type of psychedelic mushroom, which was red and white in colour. And that brings the symbolism of Father Christmas with his red and white coat. And the idea there was that these mushrooms were a great gift to those people because they would ingest them and undergo these amazing spiritual experiences, which is where the idea of Father Christmas bringing presents and gifts and goodness at that time of year comes from. So any hint of the real meaning of this hodgepodge of influences was lost way back. And what we've got instead is a festival that's celebrated in the West with materialism, and it's become all about spending money on a whole load of shit you don't need, giving presents, giving money to corporations and businesses to buy a whole load of brand names, and they have replaced what were previously the gifts given at this time of year. So it's classic satanic inversion of what was originally there, and it's just been twisted and molded into what you would call
team organized society.
Team organized society, right. So Christmas has become an aspect of team organized society, whereas in fact it has its roots in all these different things, and it's just a mad melting pot of these influences.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. And remember, everything is left brain versus right brain. All of these corporations, all of their corporate logos, all of their corporate statements, everything that they say and do is using God's sacred creations, God's sacred geometry, and then twisting them to the left. That's what corporations are. That's why they're all embracing the pyramid. And it's just that in their pyramid, it's the small g of Freemasonry. And that is the illusory God, the one that lies to you about everything. So Christmas is the exact opposite in the West of what it's meant to be. The Christmas is meant for people to meditate in their homes. That's Easter and Passover, right? So you're talking about all these holy dates, and Easter, it's about chocolate bunny rabbits. Easter is about chocolate bunny rabbits. Easter is about Passover, and you stay in your home and you hope that this carnal ravaging energy of death passes over you because you're in your temple. Your home is your temple. That's where the home came from, is from the temple. The temple are the two temples in your skull. Solomon's temple that Solomon built is the temple in his mind. Noah's ark that Noah built for that rainy day when things get so crazy and insane out there that you have a place to go to where you save all of creation, the two animals, so that everything can be born again, can happen again when the deluge or the flood is over. Noah's ark is the same thing. It's Solomon's temple, Noah's Ark, the Ark of the Covenant. It's the same thing. They're all talking about the same thing. And it's physically structured that way in your brain. If you look at your brain from the beginning, from the crown of the nose upwards, it looks like the Ark of the Covenant that they show you on Hollywood or on TV. That's the Ark. It's going within. Passover at Easter is you stay in your temple. Well, what do you think that means? That's a metaphor for meditation. 3 days of holy meditation. Gee, what could you do in 3 days? I don't know, maybe raise the Chrism Oil and become an ascended man and break free of this insanity? To become truly free? To meet God face to face and have a personal relationship with God? This isn't fantasy. These aren't just stories. This is fact. This is real science. Alchemical science means the science of the laboratory. The laboratory is in the temple. It's between your two temples. So the alchemical laboratory, where all magic is created, where lead can be turned into gold, that's the third ventricle of your brain. And let me just finish this off, Mark, for the listeners, so they can get this and tie it in with the whole story of Christmas again. Where we left off with the Chrism Oil is that it illuminates the thalamus, the light of the world. Okay, it just gets so crazy after this, brilliantly crazy. The oil then slowly, gently seeps out of the thalamus down into the right of the thalamus into what's known as the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus, as it goes down into the right, is there to reflect the slab of stone that Jesus's body metaphorically was placed after the crucifixion at Calvary, when he was placed into the tomb, and then a rock was rolled across the entrance to the tomb, and there Jesus's body lay. And it laid there, some say for 3 days, but in reality it was 2.5 days. And they went back and they went to check on Christ's body. They roll back the stone. They enter in to the tomb, into the chamber of the hypothalamus. And guess what? This sacred fertilized seed that has risen 33 years all the way back up and is crucified up 1,000-fold into the fourth ventricle, third ventricle, thalamus, hypothalamus, and there in its cave is resting for 2.5 days, is gone. And folks, again, this is science. This is real. It's gone out of the hypothalamus, and it's gone to a very specific place, and that's the pineal gland. And what it does is the electromagnetically, the fertilized seed goes to the pineal gland and it illuminates. And it doesn't matter if your pineal gland is calcified. There's all these videos now about how to decalcify your pineal gland and stuff. Don't worry about it. It's God's pineal gland. It's God's creation. Don't worry. There's nothing that they can do to destroy your pineal gland. Start meditating and you'll strip away those layers of calcium on your pineal gland. Don't worry. Stop worrying. Meditate. And we illuminate. So the sacred baby Jesus seed illuminates the pineal gland. The pineal gland turns into a bright golden light, the sun. So the pineal literally becomes and looks like the sun. Now get this is real. After a few seconds of generation of the pineal gland, a beam of light is created from the pineal gland. And this beam of light follows a path called the strius pinealis, Latin for straight line from pineal. Strius pinealis, straight line from the pineal. And this beam of light along the straight line from the pineal hits what's known as the fornix. When you look at the third ventricle of the brain, you will see the fornix just above the thalamus and just below the corpus callosum. And if you notice, you'll see that the fornix is attached on one side to the third ventricle, and on the other side, it's not attached. When this light hits the fornix rolls back. metaphorically like the stone that rolls back from the tomb or the chamber or the cave where Jesus' body was laid to rest. The stone rolls back. It literally does. It rolls back, and it opens up this final chamber in the third ventricle of the brain. And this sits above the thalamus and just below the corpus callosum, the big eyebrow that you see on the eye in the sky representation. And in that final chamber, this is where Jacob met God face to face. This is where you can meet God face to face. And there you have an encounter, a relationship, and no words are spoken. It is a feeling. It is a feeling, but it is an extremely powerful feeling, and it doesn't leave you. It never leaves you. And this is the magical process that they don't want you to ever experience. They don't want me telling you this. Santos has been doing this in relative anonymity for so many years, just constantly giving you this brilliant information. And this is the truth of all truth. This is the highest high, the holiest of holies, and it comes from the claustrum, the highest point of our brain, Santa Claus.
Okay, man, let's leave it there. I think that's quite enough information for people to get their heads around today. Certainly is for me. Awesome, incredible. We went some places. Do you just want to remind people what your YouTube channel is and some of the stuff you've got coming up there in the near future before we go?
Thanks, Mark. Our YouTube channel is Freak Sense TV, and it is really becoming a happening place. And we've got all these videos up, including the greatest story never told with you. We've done short versions, longer versions for folks. And tomorrow will be the big 2-hour video on the symbology that we talked about today, how everything in the world is left brain versus right brain, and how none of these symbols on their own are bad or evil, but they are being made to look like they're bad and evil by these people who are sending us to the false god, which is the Freemason G god. And then after that, I will be having a whole slew of videos that I've completed. I just need to get out on the same subjects, on acidosis, the lie of cancer. And then starting, and I promised this to our listeners now for about 2 weeks, but we're about another week away, 10 days away, and that's going to be the start of this series. I'm going to just do them in 10-minute, 12-minute episodes, nice and short, and it's going to be this entire journey of the Chrism Oil from beginning to end in just short series, so that everyone can take the time, find the time, and to go through this miraculous process. And so that is been a lot of fun creating, and it's going to be very fun releasing those on the channel as well. So
thanks for coming on today, man. Catch you again soon.
Thanks. Have a great day, Mark, and I appreciate it so much.
No worries.
This is just for fun.
I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up